Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to those of you who are joining us from a different time zone. Welcome to the 7th webinar of the Distinguished Speaker webinar series on special and inclusive education, organized by the Department of Education of the University of Nicosia. My name is Maria Vriki, and together with my colleague Maria Evagoru, both from the Department of Education of the university, we will be the moderators of this webinar. It is an honor to welcome Professor Lynn Fuchs to the webinar today and have her share her work with us. She's a research professor of special education, psychology and human development, and pediatrics at the Vanderbilt University, as well as Institute Fellow at the American Institute for Research. Her work today, the title of her talk, is addressing the role of language comprehension in word problem intervention to improve outcomes for children with learning disabilities. I will now pass the floor to my colleague Maria to share some information on Professor Fuchs' biography.
Thank you, Maria. Professor Lynn Fuchs has conducted pragmatic research on instructional methods for improving the mathematics and reading outcomes of students with learning difficulties, on assessment methods for enhancing teachers' instructional planning, and on the cognitive and linguistic profiles associated with mathematics development. She has published more than 500 empirical studies in peer-reviewed journals, and has been identified as one of the most frequently cited researchers in the social sciences. Professor Fuchs also has a long-standing track record in designing and providing effective technical assistance to states, districts, and teachers. She has received a variety of awards, including the AERA Distinguished Contributions to Research in Education Award and the Council for Exceptional Children's Career Research Award. Before I give the floor to Professor Fuchs, let me share some technical information. The webinar is live stream, and it will become available on YouTube and on the university's YouTube and Facebook pages, and it will be available to watch asynchronously anytime. I also invite you to write questions in the chat on YouTube or Facebook, depending on where you're watching us from, and a Q&A session will follow after the end of the presentation. Now I give the floor to Professor Fuchs.
Thank you, both Marias, for your introductions and also for the invitation to present as part of your webinar series. As you've heard, and I appreciate everyone who's on the webinar, I thank you for joining us today. I realize that for some of the time zones people are in, that this is out of your workday. And I'm happy to be participating in this webinar series in this way. So as you heard, I'm going to talk about the role of language comprehension in word problem intervention. And we think this is an important strand of the math curriculum. Word problem solving reflects the capacity to apply mathematical ideas in everyday life and in the service of STEM, including science, technology, and engineering. Word problem solving may also support advanced mathematics learning. For example, in a large national survey in the US, Algebra 1 teachers talked about and considered student preparation on and the importance of 15 math skills. And these teachers rated word problem solving as highest in supporting success with algebra, so most important, and that children were least well prepared in the area of word problem solving. And word problem solving is also a strong school age predictor of employment and wages in adulthood. But word problem solving difficulty is widespread, and it can occur even when children have good arithmetic skill. And this kind of specific word problem solving difficulty that is occurring not in arithmetic, but specifically in word problem solving, it may arise because word problem solving engages more cognitive resources than arithmetic does. But a common misperception among teachers is that if they improve children's calculation skill, this will improve word problem solving. And for some children, that's true, but it's not true for many at-risk learners. And because teachers don't fully appreciate the importance of word problem solving as a specific problem for children, they don't teach explicit word problem solving strategies in most classrooms and even in most math interventions. So for many students, arithmetic is not a sufficient pathway to word problem solving. And this is demonstrated in a large randomized controlled trial that we conducted and published in 2013 with at-risk first graders. Here in this study, the effect of arithmetic on word problem solving was modest. So the effect size of 0.22 is considered small, even though the children in this study, the at-risk children, improved a lot as a function of the intervention in arithmetic, where the effect size was large, 0.87. And so while the intervention narrowed the post-intervention arithmetic achievement gap, the word problem solving achievement gap widened dramatically. And this suggests that although arithmetic is foundational to word problem solving, arithmetic is not a sufficient pathway to word problem solving for at-risk learners. And this makes sense because word problems require text processing to build problem models and to generate number sentences before calculations can be applied. And because language comprehension is necessary for text comprehension, it makes sense that language comprehension plays a stronger role in word problem solving than in arithmetic. And this has been shown when relations between language comprehension with calculations versus relations between language comprehension and word problem solving are assessed in the same study. So for this and related reasons, word problem solving is sometimes conceptualized and studied as a form of text comprehension. And in this webinar, I'm going to explain a randomized controlled trial in which we tested the effects of word problem intervention that treats word problem solving as a form of text processing by incorporating an explicit focus on language comprehension. And while I explain this randomized controlled trial, I'll also be describing the core features of our approach to word problem solving intervention. And I'll end my presentation, my webinar, by providing additional information on word problem solving interventions we've developed and the grade levels and types of word problems those interventions address. So the study I'm going to tell you about was titled Embedding Language Comprehension Instruction Within Word Problem Intervention, and it was published in 2021 in the Journal of Educational Psychology. You see the major contributors to this study. We represented a team that worked together on this work. And you can see that the study I'll tell you about was funded by the National Institutes of Health in the US, specifically the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development. So why did we focus on word problem intervention at first grade? Well, first grade number knowledge intervention with speeded arithmetic practice dramatically narrows the arithmetic achievement gap, but at the same time, the word problem solving achievement gap widens dramatically. I told you about that a few minutes ago. This is a problem because word problems represent a major emphasis in almost every strand of the math curriculum. And word problem solving performance is also a strong predictor of wages in adulthood. But early math research has focused dominantly on number knowledge and arithmetic, with only a minor focus on word problems. And when word problems are the focus in intervention, word problems are usually a minor focus that's used in the service of supporting students' understanding of numbers. And why did we focus on language comprehension to improve word problem performance? Well, in the literature, word problem solving is viewed as an interaction between language comprehension processes and math problem solving strategies. When faulty problem solving is computationally modeled with math problem solving errors versus with language comprehension errors, correct problem solving depends more on language comprehension than on the math problem solving strategies. And when studies vary the wording in minor ways, those minor changes in the word problems dramatically affects children's accuracy in solving the problem. There's a common assumption among even researchers and teachers that students have the language comprehension for understanding problem statements and for building an appropriately word problem model. But for at-risk children, this assumption is shaky, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And this suggests that an instructional focus on language comprehension processes, as well as the mathematical aspects of word problem solving, is needed. And why did we embed language instruction in word problem intervention? Why not instead provide conventional language therapy? Well, language therapy does improve oral language comprehension, but the problem is that transfer to academic performance has been limited, and that's despite a strong association between language comprehension and academic performance. Now, transfer from language therapy to academic performance may be especially difficult for at-risk children because these children often already have an inadequate foundation of academic skill, and because they experience substantial challenges with transfer more generally. And that argues for embedding language instruction in the context of intervention that's designed to build students' word problem skill and to do that in a coordinated way to facilitate transfer. So in the study I'm going to tell you about, and in our word problem work generally, we rely on schema instruction. Schema instruction it explicitly teaches step-by-step problem-solving strategies to reduce demands on reasoning and working memory. And this includes strategies for understanding word problems as belonging to word problem types, and it includes strategies for building word problem models. At first grade, we address the 3 major word problem types that are typically included in the larger word problem curriculum. We address total problems, where 2 or more parts are combined to form a total. We address difference problems, where 2 quantities are compared. And we address change problems, where an event occurs to increase or decrease a starting amount to produce a new ending amount. And in our word problem intervention, we teach the mathematical structure of each problem type. And we do that by role-playing the problem type's central mathematical event using intact number stories without any missing quantities. And we use concrete objects, and we use the child's and tutor's names. And we connect that idea of the central mathematical event to a visual schematic into which story quantities can be entered, but we fade that visual schematic quickly and use it only to reteach as needed. We also pair the central mathematical event to a hand gesture, and this is to quickly remind students of that schematic. And then, most importantly for our intervention, we pair the central mathematical event, we tie it to a problem type sentence. So for the total problem, we teach the children to represent that type of word problem with P1 plus P2 equals T. So part 1 plus part 2 equals the total. For difference word problems, to represent that kind of word problem type with the sentence B minus S equals D, or the bigger number minus the smaller number equals the difference. And for change problems, the starting amount plus or minus the change amount equals the end amount. And once we go through a teaching phase where we're working with intact number stories, then we introduce problems with missing quantities using the same kinds of teaching procedures with role-playing, the problem type schematic, a hand gesture, and the problem type sentence. And then we teach step-by-step strategies for handling text to build word problem models and to solve the problems. So children are taught to run through the problem, read the problem, underline the word that indicates what the problem is mostly about, and name the problem type. They're taught to write. Once they name the problem type, they write the problem type's sentence, and then they enter relevant quantities from the word problem statement into the problem type sentence while crossing out any extra numbers, irrelevant numbers that might be in the problem. And then they solve for the missing quantity. So I'll show you what that looks like. Here's a total problem. Kathy has 5 pencils and 3 erasers. Pamela has 7 pencils. How many pencils do the girls have in all? So the child, as you can see, is either reading the problem or having the problem read aloud to him or her. And after thinking about it and processing it and restating the gist of the problem back to the tutor, the student identifies this as a total problem, writes T to help her remember that, and underlines pencils as the most important word in the number sentence, what the number sentence is centrally about. Then for a total problem, the child writes the problem type sentence, fills in the relevant quantities from the problem statement and crosses out the irrelevant number and solves for the missing number. Here you see a photo of a child who's working on a total problem. 4 girls and 3 boys are playing on the swings. They swing for 10 minutes. How many children are playing on the swings in all? So the child reads the problem or listens to it, underlines children as the most, what the problem is mostly about, identifies this as a total problem, writes T, then writes the problem type number sentence, fills in relevant quantities while crossing out the irrelevant number, and solves for the missing number. So 7, and then labels the answer children. Now in our study, we have a condition where we're doing this kind of word problem strategy teaching without embedded language instruction. But we also have a study condition where students are getting the same word problem solving strategy instruction, but in that word problem instruction, we have embedded language instruction. So for combined or total problems, students learn about joining words like all together and in all. They learn about the idea of superordinate categories like dogs and cats equal animals, and practice identifying superordinate category vocabulary. For compare problems, they learn about compare words such as more, fewer, than, and words that end in ER. And they learn that not all words that end in ER are compare words. So they think about the difference between bigger and teacher. They also learn for change problems, cause and effect conjunctions, then, because, so. They learn about implicit quantity change verbs like cost or ate or found, where quantities change, but there are single vocabulary words that communicate a change. And they learn about time passage phrases like 3 hours later, like the next day. And they also learn about cross-problem constructions, like the difference between more than versus then there were more. And they learn about tricky labels. So I want to emphasize that although we are teaching vocabulary and language instructions, we don't teach vocabulary and language constructions as keywords. And this is important because using keywords to solve problems, like finding more and thinking, well, that means to add. I don't have to read the problem, so I'll just add the 2 numbers, which many children do. Instead of teaching vocabulary as keywords, we explicitly teach students why searching for keywords and numbers without reading the problem and without figuring out the problem type often produces the wrong answer. And to help children appreciate this, we have them check the work of other children, problems we've prepared, where students find errors and they explain why those errors may have occurred. And our worked examples illustrate errors where these other children have relied on keywords to select the wrong operation, or have misused irrelevant numbers, or have failed to recognize that the text is talking about a two-step problem. So this slide shows you the basic structure of the randomized control trial, where we tested the added value of providing language comprehension instruction. We identified students to be participants in this study, students who had low arithmetic and low math concepts and applications at the start of first grade. 400 students entered the study. There were 391 after attrition. The 400 students were randomly assigned to 4 conditions. So we have the word problem intervention. We have the word problem intervention plus embedded language comprehension instruction. And we have a third active condition that I haven't told you about, which is number knowledge intervention. And the number knowledge intervention focused on number knowledge and arithmetic. We wanted to answer the question, is transfer from number knowledge and arithmetic to word problems sufficient to support word problem outcomes? Maybe we don't need word problem solving specific instruction. And our fourth condition was our control group, where students received the school's program. And most of the students in our control group received both the regular classroom instruction, and many received additional math intervention that was designed and delivered by the school. Now, in the first 3 these are the active conditions where we are controlling and delivering intervention. Each of those 3 conditions lasted 15 weeks, 3 sessions per week, and 30 minutes per session. All of these 3 groups also included 5 minutes of speeded strategic arithmetic practice to control and ensure for sufficient arithmetic skill. In all 3, word problem intervention with embedded language comprehension instruction, and number knowledge intervention. So here are the results. On the arithmetic outcome, all 3 active conditions, their post-test scores were stronger than in the control condition. And you can see the effect sizes for each condition, number knowledge condition versus control. The effect size was large, 0.59. In the word problem versus control condition, again, large, 0.65. And in the word problem with language condition versus control, the effect size was 0.79. So students all improved nicely if they received the active condition on the arithmetic outcome. On the word problem outcome, the effects were a little different. The number knowledge and control conditions improved a comparable amount and less well than in the word problem intervention conditions. So both word problem intervention conditions produced stronger word problem outcomes than the number knowledge condition. And what you see here is a small effect size for number knowledge versus control, 0.09, but a much larger effect size for word problem versus control, where the effect size was large, 1.08. And then for students who received word problem with language comprehension instruction, the effect size was even larger. And when we statistically compared the two word problem conditions, here again, we got a statistically significant outperformance for the condition that included the language comprehension instruction versus the word problem intervention condition that did not include the word problem, the language comprehension component. We also looked at children's word problem language. So how well did they understand word problem specific language, the kind of language we taught in the condition that received the language comprehension component? And what you see here is that only the condition that had the language comprehension condition performed better than the other three conditions. So the effect sizes on word problem language were much smaller for number knowledge versus control and for word problem versus control. And but in the condition that received language instruction versus control, the effect size was large. And when we contrasted the two word problem conditions, we found a statistical significance favoring the condition that received the language component. And we also looked to see how that effect, stronger word problem outcome, happened in the condition that received word problem comprehension language instruction. And what you see here in panel C is we have a direct effect where word problem language is superior to control on word problem solving accuracy at the end of the study. That's this arrow, the green arrow, at the bottom of the triangle. But in this condition, we also see an indirect effect on top of the direct effect of the intervention through children's improved word problem language understanding. Here, this intervention contrast improved word problem language, and for every increase in word problem language, we see additional stronger outcome on word problem solving. So we have a direct effect of the word problem intervention, plus we have a significant indirect effect occurring through children's improved word problem language instruction. What you see in this panel, which is word problem versus control, but no language instruction, we get a direct effect. We still have, students with stronger language have better word problem solving. But what we don't get, what's missing, is we don't get a significant effect for the word problem condition without language on word problem language. And what you see here for number knowledge is we don't have the significant direct effect, and we don't have the significant indirect effect. So on word problem solving, number knowledge intervention does not provide added value over control, where the effect size was 0.09 on word problems. And this is despite that number knowledge intervention improves arithmetic skill quite a lot, where the effect size for number knowledge intervention was 0.59. So what we conclude is that transfer from arithmetic to word problem solving is not sufficient to support word problem solving development for at-risk learners, where explicit structured word problem instruction is required. Also on word problem solving, embedding language comprehension instruction in word problem intervention offers added value over word problem intervention alone. and that added value accrues as a function of children's improved understanding of word problem language. So I'm going to skip this slide and talk more about our word problem interventions. More generally, what's available for teachers and interventionists who want to work on word problem solving. So each of our word problem interventions relies on schema instruction. And as I've been talking about, a schema is a category that encompasses similar problems. It's a problem type. And schema instruction encourages students to understand problems as belonging to problem types, and it encourages them to apply the known solution strategy, which we've taught them, for each of those problem types. And at the primary grades, we refer to this program as Pirate Math, we address the same word problem types I've discussed. So total problems, a difference problem type, and a change problem type. And students are taught to classify word problems into problem types, to use a problem model for the identified word problem type, to generate a number sentence, and to find the missing quantity in the number sentence. And we talk about this, a process is as like pirates finding X on a treasure map. And the pirate theme is used throughout the program for reinforcement and motivation. So we use things like treasure maps, a treasure chest, X marks the spot, and so on. And this program has been validated in the primary grades 1, 2, and 3 in the United States, as improving children's word problem solving, arithmetic, as well as their early pre-algebraic understanding. And what I mean by that is their ability to solve non-standard equations to find the missing numbers. And in all 3 grade levels, the organization of Pirate Math is like this. There are 45 lessons. We have an introductory unit of 9 lessons where children learn to define the equal sign, the plus sign, and the minus sign. They learn about addition and subtraction concepts using concrete objects and a number line. They learn counting strategies for adding and subtracting number combinations. So we're teaching them efficient counting strategies using their fingers. And we teach them about how to interpret data from bar graphs and pictographs. We teach them how to find a missing number when the missing number could be in any of the 3 slots of an addition or subtraction problem. So we teach them specific strategies, and this is all before we get to word problems. Once students have completed the introductory lessons, the tutors teach students to run through a word problem like I told you about. And the run strategy provides children with the first set of steps for approaching word problems. And the run strategy helps slow students down, helps them think systematically about the narrative, and helps them build a problem model. And it prompts them to look for and inhibit irrelevant information. And these training posters that we use have 2 sides and they stand up on the children's desks. And the more explicit side, the side with more text, is used at first. And the other side is used to encourage students to rely less on the poster. And as soon as possible, tutors remove the poster entirely in order to foster student independence. So once we're done with the introductory lesson, there's additional 4 units: a total problem unit, a difference problem unit, and a change problem unit, and also a review unit. And throughout the program, so as soon as difference problems are introduced in lesson 19, students are working on total and difference problems. Once we introduce change problems, students are working on all 3 problem types because it's important for them to practice distinguishing among the problem types. And then we have the review unit, which is entirely mixed practice across all word problem schemas. And this includes transfer features that we gradually throughout the program introduce. Transfer features increase the complexity of the problems, and they stress children's capacity. They challenge students to recognize problems as belonging to the problem types we've taught them about. And that includes identifying and inhibiting irrelevant numbers, locating relevant information from bar graphs and pictographs, solving for missing information in all locations of the number sentence, and it also includes problems that require more than one step. So here we have a word problem. You can see the solution strategy is structured similarly to what I showed you before. This is 2nd grade pirate math. So Webster made $42 from mowing lawns and $26 from walking dogs. How much money did he make in all? And you see part 1 plus part 2 equals T. Here we have 2-digit numbers that students are handling, and you see the solution with a label. We also I've mentioned but haven't elaborated on difference and change problems. These are the 2 additional problem types. So we have difference problems: bigger amount minus smaller amount equals difference. Here's an example. Pamela is 8 years old. Lynn is 15 years old. How many years younger is Pamela than Lynn? Here we have missing information in the final slot of the equation. Bigger number minus smaller number equals the difference, 7 years. But the missing number can be the bigger number. It can also be the smaller number. Here you see a change problem where students, the missing number is actually in a different slot of the number sentence. So Pamela had 12 M&Ms. Now Pamela has only 4 left. How many M&Ms did Pamela eat? Here we have one of those verbs, which is an implicit change word. So starting amount minus changing amount equals the ending. 12 minus the change amount equals 4. And the student solves for that missing information using the strategies they were taught in the introductory unit. And the answer is 8 M&Ms. So there are 4 daily pirate math lesson activities, and I'll tell you what they are at grade 2. So every lesson begins with basic facts, fluency building, and they play a game that we call Meter Beat Your Score. Here they're answering addition and subtraction flashcards, and they have 1 minute to answer as many as they can. Students use counting up strategies to fix an error before the next card is presented. So if they make an error, they have to fix it right then and there. So they're not practicing incorrect responses. And at the end of the minute, they graph the number of cards they answered correctly. And then they, in that same session, they try to beat their first score. In the second segment of the lesson, we have the main part of the lesson. This is 15 minutes. And here the tutor is presenting the daily lesson, guiding the students to use the run strategy and to cross out irrelevant information, to set up the equation for the identified problem type, to solve for the missing number, write the label, and check the reasonableness of their answers. Then we have a pirate math game where students play games that reinforce word problem instruction. And then we have independent practice, where there's timed independent written practice with standard and non-standard equations and with a word problem. So here's an example of a pirate math game. There's a game board that shows here a total problem. The student creates a total word problem to match a number sentence. So an example, the student draws the number card with 4 and the number card with 7 from a pile of cards. The tutor decides to place the 4 on the part 1 box and the 7 on the total box. And the child's task is to make up a word problem that goes with this number sentence. So an example for the 4 and 7 number cards, Giselle and Pamela has 7 pencils in all. Giselle has 4 pencils. How many pencils does Pamela have? So at grades 1, 2, and 3, our word problem interventions, pirate math, are conducted on whole numbers, total, compare, difference, and change word problems with addition and subtraction. And at grade 2, we also have a whole class pirate math program that has supplemental second grade small group pirate math intervention. We also have fraction word problem interventions. We have a line of research on fraction word problem interventions, fraction face-off at grade 4, super solvers at grades 3, 4, and 5. These fraction word problem interventions build fraction understanding and procedural skill with systematic focus on fraction magnitude understanding, calculations, and word problems. At grade 3, the intervention focuses on fraction compare and change word problems. At grades 4 and 5, the intervention, the word problem component, focuses on fraction compare, change, splitting, and grouping, so multiplication and division word problems. So I'm going to skip this slide. It shows you the 4 lesson activities at 4th grade in the Super Solvers program. I'll just tell you briefly. There's an initial problem quest segment that focuses on word problems. Then there's a segment called fraction action that focuses on understanding fraction magnitude. So activities include comparing fractions, ordering fractions, and placing fractions on 0 to 1. And this is at 3rd grade. And at grades 4 and 5, it's a 0 to 2 number line. Then there's Math Blast, where there's speeded practice on some tool skills, some basic benchmarking fractions to identify automatically, strategic speeded practice on multiplication, which is whole number multiplication, which is essential for handling fractions, and then power practice, where students have independent cumulative interleaved control review. And students also complete what we call the super challenge, and they do that every 2 weeks in the fractions program. Each weekly test is an equivalent form tapping the fractions curriculum we're teaching. And the students learn to track their own progress via the graphed scores and the skills profile that they look at from week to week. So every 2 weeks, they get a new score and a new profile where green skills are mastered, yellow skills are almost mastered, and red skills are not mastered yet. And that graphing, super challenge and graphing activity is part of an executive function component that we have as part of the fractions program. For each upcoming super challenge, students select their overall performance goal and skills for improvement. They're taught to link the importance of working hard to improving on the super challenge and in the classroom. Students use help strategy cards for handling fractions only when needed. They're taught to use them only when they need them. They're taught to assist their partner and ask their partner for help when they need it. And as part of this executive function component, they're taught to work hard and persevere with challenges, to self-regulate their talking, and to share participation with their partner in the learning process. And for more information on our interventions, you can go to this website or you can contact Angel Gaither at Vanderbilt. And for information on math interventions generally, not just our interventions, you can go to either of these 2 links that provides information and validation status on different math interventions that have been created and are being disseminated. So I'll stop there, and I think we'll be taken back to a shared screen where I can see your faces and hear what your questions and comments so far have been.
Thank you very much, Professor Fuchs, for your very interesting talk. There's a lot of information there that's very interesting. And now we can begin the Q&A session. There are already a few questions on the chat that we can read out to you. So at this point, we can ask the audience to keep posting their questions on the chat, and we can read those out.
Maria, do you want me, should I click stop sharing?
To stop sharing, I cannot see your slides right now. Have you stopped sharing them?
So I just clicked stop sharing.
Okay, okay. Can you see the chat? Can you see the questions on the chat?
Not
okay.
Yet.
Okay. So we can start with the questions that are already there. Kyriagos, our colleague, has 3 questions. I can read them one by one to you. The first is, do you believe that young students with disabilities whose foundational math skills are poor can profit from instruction on mathematical problem solving? That's the first question.
So I think the answer to that question is yes. in our studies, we have all students who have problems, pretty serious problems with math. So they're generally in math performing below, depending on the study, below the 20th percentile or below the 10th percentile. We don't have children in the studies who are classified as having an intellectual disability. So I don't know if students with intellectual disability would benefit from our word problem components, but our interventions. But we do have students who have serious difficulties with math generally and with word problems specifically. And I will say that in our study that I talked about earlier, where we were testing the effects of the added contribution of language comprehension instruction, the average standard score of students who were selected on the basis of low math, their average standard score on language comprehension was 75. So they were very much below the mean in their understanding of language. So I think that gives you a sense that the programs that we have developed do address a broad range of students with disability, but we have not tested the program with students who have intellectual disability.
Mm-hmm. It's a good indication that it could be suitable for them as well.
Yeah, we have, that's right. It requires additional testing, but it's worth trying.
Kyriakos' second question, is it better to focus on the development of their foundational math skills first before any attempt that aims at enhancing their word problem solving skills? What priority must be in such cases?
So I think that what you see in terms of the student's arithmetic skill, when arithmetic was only 5 minutes of every 30-minute word problem intervention session, I think you see that the student's arithmetic skill is being addressed in the context of word problem solving instruction. And I think that it's also the case that their number knowledge is improving within the context of word problem solving intervention because there's a lot of conversation and representation of number knowledge that is involved, is structured into the word problem solving intervention. So I do believe that it's possible to address the number knowledge and arithmetic foundational skills through word problem intervention, when word problem intervention at least is structured the way we have structured it. And I think that this is happening because in a coordinated way, again, because of the way that we're structuring the instruction.
And the third question relates to technology. Are there any technology-based interventions or tools that, in your opinion, could help students with difficulties in word problem solving in the classroom, especially those with reading difficulties?
Yeah, so I think that there we have developed classroom-based intervention at second grade. We have not done that at first or third grade. I think that there's additional work that needs to be done in helping classroom teachers structure word problem instruction in a more systematic way to support a broader range of students. I think certainly in most general education classrooms, we have students who don't need structured intervention. But I think it's possible that they develop new insights if a schema-based approach is systematically taught. I don't think that hurts. We have no evidence that that hurts higher performing students. In fact, in a study that we did at second grade, we see broad-based effects across students who at the start of intervention were low performing, students who were average performing, and students who were higher performing. So I think the schema approach to word problem solving can be effectively used in general ed programs.
Thank you very much.
So thank you very much. I come from a science education background. So while I was listening to your study and your findings, I was thinking about applications in science education as well, because it also involves a lot of reading and solving problems. So I don't know if you have any work or any studies within that area.
We do not, and I don't know of any programs, but that doesn't mean they don't exist, because I'm not a student of science instruction or science intervention. But I would guess that there are opportunities within the science curriculum to use a schema approach that would help students better understand connections between the different science topics they're learning about. And I think it would be fun and interesting for someone to do work using a schema approach. Just to clarify what I'm talking about, like we teach arithmetic to students. We use schema instruction as well, because what we're trying to do is, before we start teaching children, we have to understand how the curriculum, the arithmetic learning process, can be conceptualized in terms of problem types. So for example, there are, +1 problems and there are +2 problems, which can be explained in terms of number lines and can be easily executed without any counting, explicit structured counting strategies for most children. But there are other kinds of problems that need to be conceptualized in terms of number families. And once you have the conceptualization of a number family, you have multiple strategies for finding answers to the arithmetic problems. And so I won't go elaborate on that any further, but I think that in most math and science learning, there are opportunities for students to understand connections more explicitly between the strands of the curriculum that would help them with their holistic appreciation of the content they're learning and help them perform better on each of the individual strands they're challenged with.
An additional question that I had has to do with what happens next. So you have the structure and you have the strategy that you're using with the students that is very specific. So how do you fade from using the structure, and what happens after they finish with it?
Well, I think many students, their understanding of word problems improves with the schema-based strategies. and it improves sufficiently that they don't need to execute the entire problem-solving strategy each time that they do an individual problem. And in fact, on our post-tests, we look at the extent to which students are actually applying the problem-solving strategies that we've taught them. And it varies. Some students elect to continue using the entire step-by-step solution strategies, and others move to a less explicitly scaffolded representation of their work. And we encourage that. So when we're in our review unit, we're not scoring children's work for using and revealing our strategies. We're scoring them with the integrity of whatever work they've put down there, and the accuracy of their solutions, their answers. So we're not requiring students to have the full-blown problem-solving strategy on their paper. We're expecting and hoping that gradually, over the course of intervention, their performance improves and they don't need to use the entire step-by-step procedure.
Thank you very much. And a final question from me. We often work with teachers whose students participate in their international studies like TEAMS and PISA, and they often claim that the results of these studies for their students have to do mostly with the students not understanding the instructions rather than the lack of content. So based on your experience, how would you comment on that?
You mean they're not understanding the test directions?
Yes.
Well, honestly, I have a lot of sympathy for the students, because when we're using standardized tests in our studies, and we often do, commercially prepared tests, I think there's a lot of room for the test developers to take another look at their directions to students, and do a better job of removing test irrelevant variance from student scores, to more directly look at students' capacity to work on math when there's a very clear set of directions. So I have a lot of sympathy. Is my best response, I think.
Okay, thank you very much.
I have a question that relates to the scalability of this intervention. If I understood correctly, the strategies were incorporated in multiple lessons and in different phases. And also, I would assume that teachers may need some kind of training or professional development, some kind of support in order to incorporate them in their teaching. So I was wondering to what extent this is scalable, how it can scale up to.
Yeah, so we've never done, and I don't know of any other scaling studies, but I will say that our manuals have a set of scripted lessons with all the materials an interventionist would need for implementing our programs. People buy the manuals from us, which are provided at a reasonable, really at cost for what it costs us to duplicate and ship and have staff who do that work in dissemination. So we know that teachers are purchasing these manuals. We don't really know how well they're using them. We've been working recently with the American Institutes for Research to create an infrastructure for training tutors on our intervention procedures. And so we've made that available now as well. So people can get the materials and they can get training support for implementation.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's interesting.
And that would be available in English only, I guess.
Yes, I believe that's true.
Thank you. So I think we don't have any more questions. Thank you once more for accepting this invitation and for sharing your work with us. We just want to let you know that we have 3 more webinars in this series of webinars. So if we can share the screen so we can see the ones remaining.
Okay. Okay, there's an issue with sharing mine, unfortunately.
Okay, so I have it here. I can let you know that we have 3 more remaining webinars. One is tomorrow by Professor Douglas Fuchs from Vanderbilt University. Another one on 16th of May by Professor Kathleen Lynn from the University of Kansas. And the last one is from Professor Francesca Happe from King's College London on June 16th. You can find more information about these webinars at the university's website. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.